Look at that cute little girl. Hi.
All right. Well, I still have to read the epilogue, but I just binged like the rest of the book, the third book, because I have terrible time management apparently, but I really loved it. I know a few of us on here are from the Pacific Northwest, and my sister and I are both in Kitsap County and grew up right next to Bainbridge Island, so that was fun. And so I think a lot of us were wondering kind of how you picked Bainbridge Island for the setting for this book and what research went into it. And
oh yes, it was so many things coming together. Like I know Taryn Fisher lives up in that area. My friend Andrea Dunlop lives up there. Like everyone who lives up there has this glow about them and loves it. So that was in my head. Then I discovered Cedar Cove a few years ago. And so went online, like everything Debbie Macomber.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. From the year of being like not talking as much, I feel like I mispronounce a lot. Anyway, then the more I read about it, I just found Bainbridge online and it was like, oh yeah, I've heard of that, but I like the way it's kind of a hidden secret. Like not everyone knows about it. I was surprised when I was writing the book how many people don't know about it. So I made a deal with myself that if I finished my first draft and I was into it, that I could go up there. And that was great motivation. So I finished that draft. I went up there. I, got in a cab to the ferry and I was like, it's even better than I imagined. Like, it was just perfect there. And so fun to go around and feel like, yes, I love the idea of Joe romanticizing this. And thinking that, oh, how easy, where you can so easily run into people and find them, that no one will have secrets and nobody ever kills each other. Ha!
Yeah, you did such a good job capturing Bainbridge. I felt like just like, I don't know, just the little nuances that you threw in there, real names of restaurants, and I sent everybody the article, like the real situation of the architect stealing the sandwich sign. I was like, yes.
Because that was one of those things when I found that, I'm like, yes, like this, what I can just imagine Joe having been through what he's been through, thinking, yeah, this is the, like, when people are up to this kind of crime, it means they're, everyone's good and bored and safe. And yes. And when I went there, I went into this boutique and the woman who ran the boutique, we were just talking. It's right on the main drag. I'm trying to think of the name of it and I'm spacing, but it's a good name. But anyway, her daughter runs in like, where's the you girl? Where's the you girl? And it worked out so well that her daughter had just graduated from college and had binged the show and, knew everything about Joe. So she drove me around into so many places I wouldn't have known about.
Oh, cool.
And that worked. I mean, that was perfect because also I'm a scared driver. And in my research, I knew that there was driving to be done there, but I was just in denial.
Yeah.
So it was great to like, oh, here's this enthusiastic young person who grew up here and she's telling me about it and taking me to the places. So, yep.
She sounds like perfect prey for Joe, though.
Yeah. Like, oh, she got this look. She's like, are you thinking of killing someone right here? I'm like, not you, though. Yeah.
That's funny. All right. So it sounds like you enjoyed Bainbridge and all it has to offer. Yeah, I grew up in Paulsbo, so just across the bridge.
She drove me there because I was afraid to drive over the bridge. And she kept saying, it's not like a giant, it's not the Florida Keys, like a 7-mile bridge. I'm like, bridges scare me. Like I'm from Cape Cod. And when I go over that bridge, I'm like, it took me years to even do that. So yeah, that bridge is pretty sweet too. And I know there are ways to go other ways, but that bridge that by the casino.
Yep.
Yeah. It was a fun moment where she was like, I told you it's not a big deal. I'm like, I scare easily. So
pretty high.
Yeah. Yes. If it broke while you were on it, it would be a problem.
Right. For sure. That's one thing we were talking about before the call started was how well, even in the first and the second book, how well you do your settings, and you must have to do this research for all of them. But where are you originally from? And
yeah, I'm from Cape Cod, Massachusetts. So it's a tiny little place and, a New Englandy place. And it felt kind of Bainbridgey. So that was part of the appeal too, where I wanted to send him to a place where I grew up. But yeah, I want the setting to be a character. I want social media itself to be a character, like his nemesis. So with the first book with you, I lived in New York after I went to college and I lived on Bank Street. And it was the first book, Nerves. I was like, all right, I'm just going to put Beck in my old apartment. I'm going to, put Joe in a bookstore. Like I wanted to set it in a bookstore anyway. And I used to work in a bookstore. So, and I had her go to all the places I used to go, and it made it like less intimidating. And it also let me go a little wild. because when you're so familiar, it's like you can go a little crazy. Then the second, I had moved to LA years ago, and writing you made me want to write Joe. So then I put Joe in my neighborhood in LA.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
I hope you had curtains in your Beck-esque apartment.
I did. Yes. My old roommate is so funny. She's like, Miss Caroline, you make us sound awful. I'm like, no, I'm like, she's like, but you keep saying it's, that was your home. I'm like, but it's, it's art. You change things. Like yes, we had curtains and they were closed. But sometimes in the day in that neighborhood, it was so sweet. And you wanted them open because like our downstairs neighbor, he was outside a lot, and it would be like a waving social. It was kind of Sesame Street-ish.
Yeah.
So they weren't closed all the time, but at the important private times, they were certainly closed.
Yeah. I kind of want to give anyone, if you have a follow-up question to that line of questioning, because I don't want to just change the subject and have it be forgotten. So does anyone have any follow-up on what we were just talking about with her? Any questions you had in response to those? No? Okay. I just don't want to close it down and have people forget their questions. So we're wondering, will there be more books in the future?
Yes. The fourth book is due at the end of the year. Okay. And I wrote a first draft, and I'm now digging in and rewriting it. But it's been like so wonderful lately to do stuff like this. But, I feel like this week I'm feeling it itching. Like, yeah, I'm just going to go back in there.
Cool.
And yes, I don't want to give away things about the fourth book, but I was going to wear a shirt with a donut on it just now.
Oh, okay. I'm going to have to remember that. When I got my copy of my book, I opened it and I sent in the chats. I said, all I saw was the word meerkat, and now I'm so curious. So now I'll be looking for donuts in the next book.
Yeah.
So I was curious if you have read all of the books that have been mentioned over the course of these 3 novels. There's this huge collection of books that Joe mentions, and especially Debbie Mocum or whatever.
Yep.
I can't pronounce her name.
Debbie M.
Yeah.
Yes, I devoured those Cedar Cove books. Not all of them. There are a lot of them, but I read, the ones that I read, I was in that addictive state, couldn't put them down. It's funny, like a lot of the books I have read and some I haven't. Like from the first book, Gravity's Rainbow is one of those books I've never read, and I feel like that's mentioned. But the Paula, like, I'm just going through the books in my head. Paula Fox, I love Paula Fox. I love all her books. Like I mentioned her, and You Love Me Too. And Fashion Victim is a book I love. Amina's a good friend, and she just has a new book deal, so we're getting more from her soon. I feel like all the newer books I've read, but there are some older books mentioned, but for the most part, I've read those. Ann Petrie, I love to death. Stuart Onan, I've read everything he's ever written. If there are specific ones you're curious about, let me know.
Okay.
It's a lot of books. Yes.
But do you have specific books they wanted to ask her about that were mentioned in the books? I know we talked about doing a book club of all the books mentioned in the books, because
Columbine is fantastic. That's a book that really it was just, I carried it around just like Nomi. Like I love that book so much. And Three Women also.
Okay. Ashley, did you have a question?
Yeah, sort of in relation to the books, like all the movies that you mentioned as well, like that, like all the Woody Allen movies. Like I'm not like a huge Woody Allen fan, so I haven't seen these movies, but you like reference them. I feel like I've seen some of them. Like
yes, like so in 2013, when I was coming up with this, I was like looking at my diary when I was a kid when I saw Hannah and Her Sisters, and didn't realize it was that long ago. Like I didn't realize what an impact it had on me. So it's funny, years later, like all the Woody Allen news out, but what I like about dealing with it with Joe, it's that how like you still like what you like he still is, and I loved that fight with Melinda over that, and it turns out she's the one who still owns the Woody Allen movies. But Hannah and Her Sisters I love. Melinda I've seen, and I liked the idea of Melinda like being drawn to it for her name, and Crimes and Misdemeanors, and it's like a war I feel like we have with a lot of things these days. Like those movies, I found them when I was young and very impressionable, and I loved them. And I liked Melinda also spinning it into the Angelica Houston movie, because Angelica Houston is fantastic in that movie, and Mia Farrow and Hannah and Her Sisters. So I like the mess of it,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think
Fast and Furious movies from Hidden Bodies. I love those. Fast Five is like when I get down, I'm like, it's time to go to Brazil.
I loved that. I can't remember his name right now, but the dad was a huge Fast and the Furious fan. That was funny.
And what about Da Vinci Code? Do you have an actual disdain for that, or?
No, I feel like that's one of those things. I have to look back at you, because that book, I did read that, I think in probably like 30 something hours, or whatever it was. I just sat there completely riveted, completely sucked in a way to me I never had been in my life. Like, I've loved books, but it was something specific to it that amazed me. And when people ask that, I'm like, oh, I didn't, like, it's Joe, it's not me, but I love that book. I mean, that book to me is crack, is like, it takes you away, and it was a great reading experience. So yeah, I never meant any harm to him. And I'm like, Joe, this is where he's fucking good and fucking bad, Yeah. I do think it's funny, after I read it, that people would be embarrassed about liking it. I'm like, why would you ever be embarrassed about liking something that the page turning in that? I feel like at the end of every chapter, you're like, it can't get more intense. And then it does. I just read a book today by Catherine Stedman, out soon, The Disappearing Act, that had the same kind of compulsion, where I was going to read a chapter, and I read the whole thing today because I couldn't stop. And it has that, it's nothing like the Da Vinci Code, except for that feeling of like, must go on.
Yeah. I hope people are writing this down, because I have nowhere to take notes at the moment.
Well, that's good. It's being recorded.
Oh,
like,
thank you.
Don't remember the moment.
Yeah, I also really love that Stephen King was such a big part of you. Like, the Stephen King release, was that in Hidden Bodies? It must have been in Hidden Bodies, but
The Stephen King was in You.
okay.
Yes. I mean, it's confusing now with 3 books.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, that was in You, in the first book. And I feel like now he's mentioned in this book, and in between, him and Richard Chismar wrote these books. Have you guys read them? The Wendy's Button Box. They're a good series. I think there's the 3rd one is coming soon, but he made a character, Olive Kepnes, in the first one, and that was really nice of him. Like, that their dad, and things don't work out for Olive, but I'm like, that's kind of an honor when it's Stephen King,
Right. Yeah, well, and he was on your cover, so he obviously took it with a grain of salt. Yeah. All right, let's see here. So everyone's really curious about your writing process. Of course, how do you get into the mind of Joe? What is that like? What is that like for people you live with?
Well, I live alone, but I go home to stay with my mom a lot on Cape Cod, and I feel like I'm a psycho slob about it, and I go in these waves where I get way into it, and I'm a really fast writer, and everything's spelled wrong, and I'm like, this is it. And then I slow down and I go back and I try and think, okay, what's going on? Like, yes, in theory, this conversation could go on for 40 pages, but I'm thinking of you guys reading and like knowing I have to know the point. So on the grand scale, like, I like to think about the ending when I'm first starting out. Like, everyone with these books in particular, everyone has made me want to write another one. So midway through writing You, I wanted to do Hidden Bodies, I knew I wanted to do another one. And I think about that ending and I make a vague map, and then it's kind of like coloring, where then I just go in and paint everything crazy, but then I have to shade and nuance, and writing a later part, I'll go back and realize, oh, wait a minute. Like, so I don't sleep well, because especially when I'm in the writing zone at night, I turn off the lights and I'm like, oh, wait. And my notepads and my phone are just a mess, a fucking mess of Joe. Of like, go back to this chapter and do that. Now that he says this, he has to go do that. So it's like building a puzzle, but without a picture of the puzzle on the box. Do you guys, you know what I mean? Like, how you can have that picture to help you, or you can throw the box away.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, if I was a better outliner, I'd have that picture up there.
Yeah.
And I try to do that. I try to break it up into like getting one part of the book, getting another part.
Okay.
Also just
somebody recently said that they think that using the box on a puzzle is cheating, and I was like,
I know. I'm like, who?
That's me.
I've heard that kind of thing said.
Puzzle box.
have you? I was like, what?
I mean, did you guys do a lot of puzzles this year? I think of puzzles too, because at the beginning of quarantine, I bought one, I did it, and I forgot about, like, then it's done. Like,
What can you do with it after that?
Yeah. But yeah, I get really in my head, and I think I get, like, my friends and family are very understanding by now that, like, they know when I'm like in it, and yeah.
Okay. How was it with the first book, having people read it for the first time? What was that like for you?
It was wonderful, because I would finish a part. I made friends read that first chapter like many, many times. It's one of those things when I go back and look at 2013 emails, I'm like, oh my God. And it was great. My mom and her sisters and my cousin, I would finish a big section and send it to them. And then it would be these funny conversations, like, your mom suddenly talking about blowjobs. I'm like, what is that like happening? Like, and what was great was that they were all reading it as I wrote it and were really into it. And it was fun to hear what they were thinking. And also that they felt that he was real, like, cause with friends, they would get confused. Cause one day I'd talk about, oh my God, like I love Joe and he's this and he's, quoting this and that. And the next day I'm like, oh, I did a murder that like scared me. And they're like, wait a minute. Like, I thought you were writing about a nice guy. I'm like, oh, I am like a good guy, but also a murderer. So it was like, yeah, just read it. Like, it's because I'm, to this day, a friend of mine always teases me. He's like, you are the worst person at describing your own books. Like, I got into a car once and I'm talking to the driver and he's asking me about writing. I'm like, oh yeah, I write these books about a guy who loves books and movies and, is kind of shy and not the best at connecting, but he works in a bookstore. And he's like, you mean that serial killer Netflix show? I'm like, no, like.
That's so funny. Do you find that Joe's character is kind of pervasive into your mind? Like, do you find yourself thinking the ways that he does, or in everyday conversation, just think Joe would think this, or I don't know.
I feel like it brings out this sick side of me whenever I see, like a couple weeks ago in my building, we have like the mail room where all the boxes, it takes one key to unlock all of them. And the door was open, like the postman just hadn't closed it all the way. And I'm like, oh my God, Joe could go in and take everyone's mail right now, bring it all upstairs, go through all of it, put it all back, like, or blame the mailman. Like, yeah, I definitely have him, especially over all these years, in my head. So it's a strange thing to be very aware of. Like, I feel like that's part of why I wrote them, because I'm scared and I'm not like that in real life. So it was kind of like exercising that, like, what am I so afraid of? And it's like, because someone could do that with all that mail.
Yeah. Good to know that you're not like that, though.
Yeah.
Some of our
but not Joey. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Some of our discussions have been about Joe and kind of his capacity for love and emotion, which I think came up in this book a lot, or at least a few times in conversations with Love and with Mary Kay. So in your mind, as the person who has created this character, is he somebody who is capable of love, or is this pure obsession, or what is
love this area of discussion too, because I feel like for me, if I had a solid yes or no answer, it wouldn't be interesting to write. Like, I like the mess of it. I like the days when I'm writing and I feel crazy because I'm like, God, like this could work. Like this could be a good relationship. And like, that's what I live for, is to feel like that it is possible for someone with these issues to have a good relationship. And also because I'm writing his perspective, that's the drive. Like, in theory, I don't know. And in that way, in the fourth book, it's another one where I'm like, you know what? If some of these people wouldn't be such jerks, and if
this could have worked out for him.
Yeah. Yes. Like, so I'm happy that you're feeling that way and thinking about that, because that is something that fascinates me.
Yeah, we've definitely had some discussions, and everybody has their own opinion. I don't think there's a decision. I think it's pretty split down the middle. I think some of us think he is capable in his own way. Maybe it's not what we all interpret as love in our everyday life, but in Joe's world it is.
Right. Like, it's that thing that some people do want to be controlled. And I think that he's drawn to women who even unconsciously are seeking attention that way. Like, I feel like with Beck, to me, it was like, Benji's not paying attention to her and he's ditching her and being really open about it. And here comes someone who has no ADD when it comes to women at all.
Yeah.
And Love, like, she's enabling her brother and she likes someone who's taking care of her, but she's, that's a mess too, because once you're so used to making excuses for someone, along comes another man and hey, it's someone new to make excuses for.
Yeah.
And Mary Kay, I feel like, yeah, it's easy to stay married and functional when there's no other guy around who's new and available and giving you all kinds of new special attention.
Right. Yeah. We also talked a lot about, in our Hidden Bodies chat, the codependency of 40 and Love, and kind of how that played into the story. And it wasn't necessarily Joe that caused the crazy. It just kind of happened around him as a result of that. And
Yeah, I think of him as bringing out the crazy that's there, the toxicity that's there. That was like in each book, I'm like, what are these people going to learn about each other or be forced to acknowledge? Like it was never about getting away with murder. It was like when someone upsets him, he genuinely wants them to be happier and figure out what's wrong with them so they will stop upsetting him. So I like the circle of that logic, you know?
Yeah, stop upsetting him or the women that he's currently obsessed with. Okay. Does having the TV show, has that changed your process at all? Does your image of what it should be change because of what's been portrayed on TV, or have you kind of kept that separated?
I keep it separate. Like it's changed in the sense that I feel like there was like a year of promotion stuff where I had false eyelashes and was on red carpets and all over, and it was great. But I remember in the back of my head, I'm like, gotta write another book, asshole. Like, like it's the moment you're talking about something more that you're doing it. So I'm so happy to have the show. I also love that we had the long road where like we were first at Showtime, then it was Lifetime, it aired, you know, it like wasn't going to come back, and then Netflix, and then who knew that it would blow up like that. So it's nice to have that much time to kind of slowly adjust to it. But then the whole new adjustment of suddenly all the memes and everything. But when I sit down to write the books, I'm like, this is me in control of this. This is my job, is to get the reader in there. Like it's like a book. It's such a different medium. I want you to feel sucked into the writing. You know what I mean? Like I'm not a good visual thinker. So it was weird to be in that atmosphere where it's about what you're looking at when so much of the books for me happen in his head. So it's like getting back into like, wait, I got to think about where he is since Hidden Bodies. Like their season 2 was different. And I'd started writing this book years ago, like in the thinking way of making the plan. So a lot of it was laid out. So yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, the book was much different than that second season. So we all kind of were talking about that, which ending we thought was more appropriate for Joe, but I think most of us like the book better. I think.
And I think that's fun to have that meta, you know, like if I could have every page on camera shot, absolutely.
Right.
But I mean, they're in this room doing like a different kind of story, and the pop culture junkie in me loves that.
Does anybody have any?
Someone's always like the bathtub of champagne. I'm like, I know. Yes. Like, if I ruled the world, yes.
Gosh, that would have been a great scene though, for sure. Want to open it up for anybody if you have any questions. Anybody? I think we have the raising hand option. Is that a thing? Maybe.
Like raising hand.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking the emoji thing. Yes. If you do the reactions, raise hand if you have a question. But
well, can I ask a question for all of you?
Of course.
How do you all know each other?
What's that?
How do you all know each other?
Oh, well, there's a group of us, probably 4 or 5 of us, that are in a Pacific Northwest Women's Book Club on Instagram. We've never met because this all started post-COVID. So, you know.
Oh my God. Oh, that's cool though.
And then Amanda and I run a monthly buddy reads. It's Pacific Northwest buddy reads. And we just open it up to all of Bookstagram for people to join in and buddy read with us. So we've all just connected via Instagram.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Oh, and I just thought of another book, and you love me, the Sarah Geo, The Violets book. I love that book.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Write it down, everybody. Okay, Ashley has a question.
Had to figure out how to put my hand back down. So I just have a question about your choice of using the second person, because I noticed you used it in the first book and the third book, but not really in the second book. So why did you choose to do it that way?
The first book, it was like the creative natural choice. It was like this book begins with her walking into that store, and in that moment, she doesn't know that her whole life has just become his. So it felt like that. In the second book, originally the 3 titles were going to be You Love Me. And in that way, it was like, everything is about you, everything is about love, and everything is about me. And me meaning Joe. But then they wanted to change the title. And I feel like that started early. And it's interesting about how those kind of issues affect your brain, where I was like, yeah, I feel like I did start writing it in the second person in Hidden Bodies, and it didn't feel right because we're opening with him. He's got what he wants, right? Like the you comes from the longing. And I feel like once he's in there, he stays in there. But in Hidden Bodies, it starts with him so happy that it felt like, no, this is like happy to be who he is, where he is. And then it's a burning psychotic rage. And it's not you, because it's like, it's directed on this search to save himself and love. And then there was going to be love, because it's the way love takes him out of that. And this one, it was just like reversing things, where this time he's walking into a book space that belongs to a woman. And the next one is is going to be a you again too.
Okay.
But
Well,
in a trickier way. Yeah, not right off the bat, I don't think. Very dangerous to talk about that book when you're not done with it.
we won't ask questions about it. So, does anyone else have a question for Caroline? I'm feeling like I'm out of the pre-planned questions, but Krista has a question.
Oh, I see the hand. Yeah.
Okay. I think I don't do like 500 Zoom meetings a week now, the way I couldn't unmute myself. I guess I'm just curious too, like how much of a process, for the Netflix shows, like how much they consult you at all, or if they don't, and they basically just take your idea and kind of run with it, or do you have like parameters on them, like you can't go this far out of the realm? And then for me, like one of the things, like I refused to watch the Game of Thrones series because I was so mad that they just like he's notoriously the slowest writer ever. And and I get it. So like you really couldn't wait for him. So they had to finish it. But like, as an author, if that kind of puts like pressure on you, because you don't want them coming up with an ending to like your stories.
Right. It's all still so new to me and surreal. Like the first season, it was different. The timing, like You and Hidden Bodies were done out in the world a few years ago. And I knew right away that it was going to look and feel like that book. And then there were like little changes, and these people have so many successful shows that like, okay, good example is, remember Paco in the show, where I was initially like, oh my God, a child, like, a little kid. And they're like, well, he can't sit there and talk to typewriters. Trust us, this will let the viewer see his sensitive side. And I'm like, oh, right, it's television where you have to watch people doing things. So, but even introducing that character, that actor I love in real life, and to me was so good, it alters the DNA of who Joe is a little bit, because the books are so much about loneliness, about him not having anywhere to put that love. So I felt I wasn't surprised in the second season when I went in to talk to them about it, and they were like, well, I don't want to give spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it, but they were going to change basically the DNA of love. Because at that point also, when you choose to keep Candace alive, I'm like, if there's one thing Joe is thorough about, it's that those women are dead in the books, but it's just such a different machine. But it's like when you change one thing, so then you change another. And so I have consulting ability, but the deeper it gets into season 2, I'm like, okay, this feels like now we've got two very different worlds going on. But if you like one, you'll probably enjoy the other. And I like doing what I'm doing. They like doing what they're doing. And that's just a natural like break, because again, like it's really fun when those two books are published out there and they're making a show. But when I have deadlines to go back into that character, I'm like, I can't read the scripts and put myself into it. Plus which they've established their own territory. Does that make sense?
No, it does. I mean, I find that interesting, and kind of, for you, I mean, as the writer, like that's just such like a unique thing to have happen, is to have,
yes,
kind of a book that's more of like a series too, to see how it just sort of altered your process and your thinking.
And I'm not a Game of Thrones person, but when I started reading about it, I'm like, oh my God, like I had the heart. I'm like, he's such an enormous, and to him sitting there trying to write that book, I'm like, that's what scares me a little bit. If I'd gotten super involved in the show, I did not want to not write books.
Well, and as the reader who read those 1,000-page books, and then I was like, you read it, and then just, I don't know, when the network just kind of, and I get it, they kind of had to finish. It was a huge series. I mean, probably one of their biggest money makers ever. You have to keep going, but I just, like, as the impact that would be on the author, I can imagine that's not,
and I was happy I was happy that I'd written for TV before, so I know what it's like. Like, I love the limitlessness. Game of Thrones is a great example, the limitlessness of fiction, that you can also change your mind. You can suddenly go anywhere, because part of with Hidden Bodies, I mean, they're in Little Compton, they're on the water. And when I wrote my episode of season 1, I remember Greg and Sarah were like, you have like 6 night shoots and 2 restaurants and 4 outdoor locations and a bus. I'm like, why not? They're like, well, budget. Like, oh, you're writing fiction. Like I think Joe is controlling because I'm controlling with what I can control in the work. So I like when I'm like, oh my God, they're going to go into the woods. And now we're going to have this, bloody thing with animals in the woods with no consideration of shooting it, of how it would happen in real life. That's why
I had told the ladies that the first one, You, was shot like 3 blocks from me at a bookstore right here in New York City. So that was really cool to kind of see it shooting in real time back when.
Oh yeah, it's so cool. And I love how many more people know about the books too. And then to see like this, what started out as your crazy little toy, like suddenly there's a person playing it and I go online to procrastinate. I'm like, fucking Joe, leave me alone. Like
that casting was spot on though. Good.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. That is I will never get over that. It matters so much, and to see it nailed like that. Yep.
Yeah. Samantha, I see you, but I wanted to add to what they were talking about is, as someone who read the books when they first came out, the first 2, watched the show in between, and then went back to revisit, I was like, I forgot how freaking filthy Joe is, like in the books, because the show, he is so tamped down compared to the books. And jumping back into them, I was like, holy shit.
So when I was gearing up to really get into the real writing of You Love Me, and I'm looking at things in the books, I'm like, oh, right. Like what, yes.
Okay, go ahead, Samantha.
I'll mute myself there. Do you feel like they fully captured the essence of your characters in the show, or did the show affect how you wrote Love in You Love Me? Because I kind of felt like Love, while it was different in the second book, their characterization of her in the show kind of matched with where she went in the third one.
Oh, it's not like I would have to look at Hidden Bodies. Like for me, in between Hidden Bodies and You Love Me, like a lot of off-camera stuff was in my head. Like off-camera meaning like between the books, of like what she expects the pregnancy to be like, what it's actually like, how it changes her. I could write a whole other book about Love's pregnancy, if that makes sense. So I feel like it is strange that you don't have my notes on that, you know what I mean? And like all of that for me, like was supposed to be about the pregnancy changing her, the way that like, it wasn't the show, it was how she suddenly is looking at her own brother again. Yeah. So she's different.
That was an interesting turn of events, that's for sure. All right. Anybody else have a question, follow up? Trying to think of, I know I have some in my mind, but.
I just wanted to say I sent a little direct message to Rachel, but I looked up Debbie's last name and it's Maycumber, like cucumber, but Maycumber.
Like, that's good. Yes.
Yes. I was just curious.
Every day in my head, I say Macomber, Maycumber, like all different things. So yes. Yeah,
I definitely said like Maycomber. I never really thought to look it up. And then I decided to Google it quickly, and there was a list of like 10 authors' last names who were frequently mispronounced, and hers was on there.
That Gillian Flynn was too.
Yep.
There's a great video on YouTube that Debbie Maycumber.
Yeah, Maycumber.
Has where she walks you around like the town that inspired Cedar Cove, that I might have watched 100 times or so.
Looks like Katie has a question.
Hi, I was just wondering if you had any like male friends or any guys that helped you with some of those like inner workings of like what Joe is thinking of sometimes, or.
Yes, I have a friend who's the first book was a psychologist who I asked a few things, and then my brother, and I have then a few guy friends that I'll ask about, uncomfortable questions about the male anatomy and and the male experience, and then reading too. But yeah, it's always a hard conversation. Greater in me. Yes.
I also just remember that I was reading today, and the John Stamos reference in your third book cracked me up so hard. So good.
I'd forgotten about that. Someone tweeted it the other day, and it's really like when it takes so long to get the book out there. This is the fun part of like remembering what's in there.
Yeah, there are so many small little quips, and yeah, I'm always laughing out loud at Joe and what he thinks and his vision on things.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the most fun part for me to do.
yeah. So I guess what we ask every author is, who are your favorite authors? What books do you love to read? Favorite books? And do you read the genre that you write when you're reading for fun, or do you go out of your comfort zone, or what's your normal reading style?
I like to mix it up a lot. Like today, I wake up like, what am I in the mood for? I'm slowly reading this Bruce Wagner book. He's a writer that I've loved over the years, but for me, it's so packed and so dense that it'll take me forever to read it, but in a nice way. So, and also in between books, I'm like, oh, I'll do a few pages of that. So the book I read today, I loved the Cat Stedman book. And it was like, I woke up wanting to get absolutely sucked into something, and I did. And I like when it works that day. Other times I wake up, like one of my favorite authors, Ann Tyler, and I'll be like, okay, I want to go on like a slow burning, thing that's different from what I write. And other days I wake up, it just depends on what I'm in the mood for. And I love to have different kinds of books all around me so I can go with that feeling. And then I love to read other writers because we get to support each other and all of that. And that's a nice thing. But it can be weird when you're in the writing and you're reading and you're like the book today, I'm like, look at this, look at how every chapter it's like boom, boom, advancing. I'm like, yes. When I'm looking at my like draft of the new one, I'm like, that's okay. It means I can fix it. This is inspiring.
Yeah, that's cool. Katie has her hand up again.
Do you have a favorite like format to read in, or do you like audiobooks, or do you like getting from the library?
You know what it is? It's like I like bending things and knowing where I am. And I like the way that I can, you can open a book and tell what part that you opened and read a lot. So I like paper books, but lately, like I just read this book by David Yoon that was really good, Version 0. And that was a different book for me because it's like a supernatural social media, but it felt like a movie, and there are a lot of tech jargon in it. And nothing like the Joe books in the sense that this is about a guy who like literally works for a company like Facebook. And that was it's an adrenaline like rush. So that was another book that was like, oh, wow. Like I love reading a book and feeling like, yes, this is a different way to do a book, where he's using like press releases and like, like things that the company puts out in their internal memos. And so, yes, I don't know where I was going with that, but I was going with that was that I read that book on my phone because of COVID. Like we don't get as many paper books sometimes for early reads, but I've gotten better at reading on my phone.
That's awesome. Are you a Stephen King nerd? Have you read?
Oh yeah,
Stephen King.
Yes.
Okay.
I get embarrassed because I feel like he probably thinks I'm psycho. So talk so much about him. When it was his 70th birthday a few years ago, EW asked me to write something about him, and it's one of those things that I look at him like, I went a little over the top, like I said, because it's one of those things. Since I was a little kid, before I was allowed to read them, I wanted to read them.
Yeah.
I love him. I love Joyce Carol Oates is a favorite that I like reread a lot. Cormac McCarthy. Oh my God, so many. Like,
I think everyone here knows that I share a birthday with Stephen King, so we're connected.
Yeah. That's a good connection to have. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else have a question? You don't want to cut her off and have you remember after she leaves. No? Okay. Well, I so appreciate you coming. It's been so fun, and revisiting the books and getting to delve back into the life of Joe is always fun. So I look forward to this next book. Can't wait to see what he gets into.
Thank you. Yes, thank you all for being here and reading and everything, and really great questions too. And if you forgot anything, you know how to find me.
Yes, I do. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
You are on the same birthday as Stephen King. That's the way you said that.
Oh, we have to do a picture. I don't know if Brenda and Kim can come on camera. If not, we'll just do it. But can we do a picture?
Oh, yes. I just sit here.
Yeah, we can all smile.
Oh wait, looks like Kim's trying. Here she
Oh,
comes.
she has a mask. I do at work. Thank you for being here, Kim. Brenda.
Yeah, I'm sorry it was late. Still at work. Obviously, you can see the dog e-collars behind me.
Oh, nice.
So
So where do you work?
at that clinic,
Oh, yay. But what are those on the wall?
the cones of shame.
Oh my God, I thought it was art. I thought it was a decoration. Oh, those are the
No.
cones for the dog that has surgery?
Yeah.
Oh my God, oh, I'm thinking it's like this sculpture.
No.
Looks good.
This is
Like
funny.
moons, doesn't it? Someone
Yeah. It looks like fans. All right. We'll take a quick picture. Maybe. Okay. Oh yeah, we could have all held up our books. I'm such a bad
Oh,
planner.
right. I'm bad at this too.
Mine's purple. I don't have my cover on me. It's in my car. It travels well.
Yeah, I like to take the cover off too. And it's purple.
All
I
right.
got the ebook, so I don't have a book to hold up.
No, that's all right.
That's
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. This was so fun.
Thank you.
Rachel, thank you so much for
Thank you.
having me, all of you. Happy reading.
Yes, thank you so much. All right.
Much.
Bye.
Bye.